Pope Nicholas V, and how he gave the authority for the Portuguese and King Alfonso V to come into West Africa and take whatever they wanted from those who didn't believe what they believed, and that was what started to open the door. And they're like, I don't believe it. Well, look, the Catholics will tell you themselves what they did. You're standing in the Serengeti and you're like, this is really on earth. Then you go out to Zanzibar, and I've been to Seychelles and seen the beaches and the waters, and so that's a unique quality. But then I go to South Africa, and then there's Table Mountain. Then I go out to Zambia and Zimbabwe and visit Mosa Oyotumi. That is what everyone knows as Victoria Falls. I have a problem calling it Victoria Falls because of the colonization of Victoria, who was the Queen of England at the time, and going out to the great Zimbabwe Empire in Zimbabwe, going to the churches of Lalibela in Ethiopia, the great pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx in Egypt, and going to the village in Aswan, going to Senegal and walking with the lions in Senegal and petting the crocodiles in the Gambia, getting my dual citizenship in Sierra Leone, then spending time in Cotonou and looking at the huge statue right there in Cotonou in Benin, and then in Togo, spending time in Togo and just learning about the history in Togo. And then one of my favorite places is Cote d'Ivoire, and going to Grand Bassam in Cote d'Ivoire, and then in Cameroon. I mean, I could just go on and on. Right?
Hello guys, and welcome back again to another amazing episode, and this is the Diaspora Transition episode, where we speak with diasporans who decided to relocate from the diaspora, being the US, UK, and currently living here on the continent, or even moving back and forth. We dive into their lifestyle here. We ask them why they decided to embark on this journey, and why Africa, and even living here. How's it like to live in Africa, Ghana? And yeah, we dive into their lives. So today we do have here someone very special. It's been a long time coming. He's a very busy man. I've been chasing him everywhere to get you guys this interview, but finally it's happening. And he goes by the name Jay Cameron. He's been on the continent for a number of years now, doing an amazing thing, moving people from the diaspora, making them visit Africa for the first time, taking them to awesome places. He's been to Ghana, he's been to several other African countries, and currently he's here in Ghana. So without further ado, Jay Cameron, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Welcome on the show.
You have pronounced my name correctly. I've heard everything. I've heard everything from Jay Cameron to Jay Cameroon, and you said it perfectly, Jay Cameron. Thank you so much. And one, glad to be here, and we have been trying to make this happen over some time.
Yes.
And now is the time for it to happen.
True.
And for those who don't know, I am the president and founder of Maximum Impact Enterprises, which is we primarily focus on travel to African diaspora destinations around the world, but we also focus on educational resources and bridging the gap between Africa and the African diaspora. So that's in a nutshell to kind of bring it all together, so that our focus is all things Africa and making sure that as descendants of the continent, that we are able to connect those dots and stay connected through all the different cultures, because there's so many different African cultures and African descendant cultures around the world.
True. How did that begin for you? Normally I want to see the beginning of the story. You are an American.
Yes.
Right? When did Africa came into the picture, and how did this whole journey started for you?
Well, as I was getting older, I realized I had never been to the continent of Africa, and really didn't do a lot of extensive travel anywhere. Pretty much close to where I lived, along the east coast of the United States. I'm from the Washington metropolitan area, Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And so because of that, I was like, why is it that I've spent the majority of my life having never visited the continent of Africa? I was not aware that there were more than 50 countries. I didn't understand anything about any cultures. Other than, well, maybe somebody came from Nigeria, or somehow someone came from East Africa or something like that. I had a little bit of understanding, in South Africa, of course, but I was actually in an Uber one day.
Uber?
An Uber.
Okay.
And a young lady started talking about Ethiopia. She's from Ethiopia, and she started telling me all these things about Ethiopia that I never knew. And she's like, you need to go one day. And this was back in 2016. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll get there one day. One day comes around. So 2018, I decided that I was going to actually go somewhere on the continent. And I decided to come to Ghana because I didn't want to go someplace that was just like America. And it was like, well, why am I going to Africa or Ghana or whatever country if it's going to be just like where I'm leaving? So I picked Ghana because it had the perfect balance of contemporary with traditional. And so the funny part is how I decided on Ghana was that I used Google Earth.
Really?
Because I was so ignorant about the continent that I figured that if I go, let me look over and see if there are going to be huts and people in the streets, naked with, because that's what they show us in America.
Yeah.
Now, some people say, well, it's the 21st century. We should, the information is out there, but the reality is we don't have the priority of seeking that information because the narratives have been so negative for our entire lives.
Right.
So I decided I didn't want to be like everyone else. I didn't want to walk around sounding ignorant and then being ignorant. So I said, well, let me go and see for myself. And that's when I decided to get on the plane in 2018, and my whole life changed in ways. I got to know who I was.
Really?
When I came to Ghana.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning in America, we're a hybrid of all types of cultures and, depending on where you live in America. So you have a lot of people who are melanated, brown, but their minds are European, white, American. So they don't even think, it's like their mind, because that's the system they were raised in. They were raised in an education system that promoted European supremacy and European ideals and European culture. And what it did was it frowned upon anything African. It made Africa appear as if it was a charity case, as if it was a place full of sickness, disease, and corruption, and giraffes, and elephants and hippos.
Yeah.
And so that was the extent of it. It wasn't this place that had all of these natural resources with these amazing people, amazingly intelligent people doing phenomenal things. It never portrayed itself, it was never portrayed in America as if it were a continent that sustained the world. Like if this continent disappeared, the world would be in trouble. So it was never, so we had no interest, the majority of us, I would say. I don't want to speak for everyone because some people had families and households and systems that really encouraged them to learn about the continent. But I didn't come from that. I came from a place where people would mock the continent and say, oh, look at, they're living in trees and they're living in huts and they're starving. Let's go do a missions trip and go over there and save them. And then when I landed and I put my feet on the ground for the first time, I realized I was the one who needed to be saved.
Wow.
It wasn't, no one here. What we have in America, as far as that whole piece, they already have it here. So some people coming on these different trips, and I'm like, y'all are already bringing what they already have.
Yeah.
So it was, when that happened, I understood that I was severely miseducated about the continent. And if they label us African American. So if you are labeled African American, but you have no connection to Africa, what type of deficiency do you have? So what you then lean on is, well, I got my own culture. I got my black culture. I ain't African, I'm American. Then I ask, well, what is American?
Yeah.
Then we would always hear, those Africans sold you into slavery. They sold you into slavery. And I think to myself, well, I've never been a slave. I've never been enslaved. So how did they sell me into slavery? So it was these little layers of ignorant conversation, but it had so much power because it had a subliminal impact to say, you might not want to spend your money on that. You might want to spend your money on Cancun. You might want to spend your money going to the oppressor's backyard, London, and spend your money there and live there and enjoy that. I might want to go to Paris and take a picture in front of one of the greatest symbols of oppression, the Eiffel Tower. Let me go take a picture in front of that with my melanated self. That's how the mind gets twisted if you don't know any better. So I started learning and seeing what colonization did on this continent, and it started to change my perspective about slavery, what happened, the complexities, and how the narratives have been told. In the U.S., we're educated under a European system. They tell us what intelligence is, and then what they'll do is they'll demonize, oh, that's primitive. But what they'll do is they'll steal the primitive technology
It's true.
and then twist it around as if they invented it.
Yeah.
And then those of us who don't know any better because
And
they
they
stole
copyright it.
Yeah, copyrighted and patented. And then because they stole the ancestors and brought them over here, they would steal their ingenuity and then somehow claim it as their own. And so when you understand the mindset of the colonizer and the imperialists, then you get
when
it.
did this awakening started for you? Because what you're telling me is an eye-opening. Even, I mean, for myself, I learned this later on in my life. But when did that started for you? Because most people in the U.S., African American outriders, would say they are indigenous to the land of the U.S. And then, you know what I'm saying? And
Well, you've heard that too.
I've heard that. I
Yeah.
remember I was in China and there's an African American brother, and we ended up talking about our differences and how we are the same. And And he's like, no, he don't think that we're the same. He was born in the U.S. His
Yeah.
forefathers, everybody had land in the U.S.
Yeah.
And he got so offended for us calling him an African American.
Uh-huh.
It's like he's not African. That really kind of make me really think deep. Like, are they really Africans or?
Well, that's a condition of colonization, because I've heard it. I hear it on my channel. They try to come for me. I don't care, because I tell them, I said, well, there's no doubt that we have indigenous blood, and there's no doubt. I personally believe that there were people from the continent of Africa who made it to the land that we know as America before the Europeans made it there. Even with that said, those same people still came from the continent of Africa. But what colonization always does is it seeks to alter the indigenous mindset, the indigenous cultures. So if you can master the art of transplanting a person to a new place and changing the way they see themselves, and then they pass that down for generations to come, then you can control them. So whenever I hear someone say, well, you know, we're not African, we're indigenous, I'm like, okay, part of that's true. You know, you got some of that indigenous going on, but don't deny the African component. And then what I find out is that I've yet to meet anybody who has that philosophy and that mentality who spent any extensive time in West Africa. I met one person, he said he went to East Africa. I said, it's a little different. To come to West Africa and see your aunties and your uncles and your aunts, and then they don't want to do that because they don't want to spend the money to come. And so they'll say, well, those DNA tests are fake, and this is fake, and this is fake. And the reality is, when you come here, you begin to understand the origins of the mindset that even allows that type of thinking to happen. When you understand what colonization did, and when people were forced on the ships and they were forced to be baptized into Catholicism. Forced. Now, some people say, no, they weren't forced. And it's like, really? I mean, it goes, again, to speak to what someone has, when you come here and you see how things flow, you can see exactly how things flowed across the ocean and how it happened in America. So time and time again, somebody will come with it, and I'll say, have they been to those dungeons? No. Have they even been, how much time have they spent among the people to see the similarities? There's some things that colonization could not erase. And when the way people are built, the way people move, the way people prepare their food, the way people operate, there's certain things that just cannot be erased. Now, when I look at my genetics and my genealogy, it is a mixed genealogy. So there is a considerable amount of European. There's a small amount of indigenous, but the majority is African, and the majority of that African is West African. I do have some East African and some South African, but the majority of it is West African. Now, if I'm really going to be true, if I really want the truth, I have no problem acknowledging whatever it is. So if I'm indigenous and all of that, I have no problem with it. But the thing is that 9 times out of 10, when you speak to those people, they resist anything that's going to tell them that, you know what, perhaps you do have African in
Because they
you.
see it as inferior.
Yeah, well, that's part of the colonization. Because all those Africans over there.
How do we begin to change that mindset, you know, collectively?
Well, through information. But when you have cognitive dissonance, and I believe it's a psychological condition, when folks don't want to just dive deeper into it, because when folks don't want to dive deeper into it, because all I wanted was the truth. Even if the truth hurt me, even if I found out that I was a cat from Zimbabwe, I could handle being a cat from Zimbabwe instead of walking around believing a lie. And so those are things that it goes to the individual, but then we have to keep having a conversation, keep breaking down, keep analyzing the source of our information. And then as we begin to break down the sources of information, what we can do is put together pieces of the puzzle that make logical sense. You know, sometimes it's just logic. Sometimes you just look at it and you say, well, the Portuguese were everywhere in Africa. And you can see all the different forts that the Portuguese built in the north, the west, the south, and the east. So you look at that and you say, what was going on here? Portuguese, everywhere. Oh, the Dutch were here. The Belgians were here. The British were here. The French were here. The Swiss were here too. The Danes, wow. The Danish were here. All of these people were here. So you start putting that in order. Then you say, well, because here's a big argument. They'll say, well, There's no way they could have transported all of those millions of people on ships. I come back and I said, well, how all these Europeans get over in America? How did they get there? And there are more of them. So clearly they got over there on ships. We see that somehow that transport was happening. We see they were trading, so they were doing all of the millions of, going from Europe all the way around into India. So when the logic, some things are just logical, you stop and you think. Now, I also had to be willing to say, okay, what are some of the opposing arguments? What are some things that they're saying that could cause you to think? And that's when you start analyzing and say, well, they would find artifacts in South America from African tribes, and you would see symbols of African artwork in South America that predated 500 years ago. And so that's when I'm able to say, well, before Columbus came, I have no doubt that with the ingenuity of the Moors and the ingenuity of other African civilizations, that they could have navigated across those waters, especially into South America because it's so close, going into Brazil and places like that. So I don't doubt that. And I think it also, part of to answer your question, is being objective. Whenever someone's not willing to be objective, I always question it. If it's just the only way, my way is the only way of thinking, and any type of other thought, and they try to dismiss other lines of thought, that speaks to someone who's been indoctrinated or brainwashed a particular way, or they spend a lot of time listening to propaganda coming from any source. And propaganda not only comes from the European side, but it also comes from other sides. You know, if someone has an agenda and that's what they want to talk about, those who have that particular mindset will buy into it. And it takes a lot to break it down. It really does. No,
I wanted to ask a question about challenges. Like, you've been trying to bring people down here with a mindset of, I had someone tell me that her parents in Canada told her that they would rather live in poverty in Canada, right, than to move to the continent. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And you work with people like that all the time, bringing them to Ghana, Senegal, all these African countries. How do you handle stuff like that when you hear it?
Well, what I've learned to do in this process is respect each person's subjective opinion. Because they may have had an experience on the continent that turned them off. And so they may not have been able to, or may not be able to take that and say, okay, we got 1.6 billion people, there are 54 countries, there are thousands of cultures. That's one country. That's one situation. That's one incident. Everybody does not have the ability to be that objective. So sometimes they'll say, well, okay, I just want to go back to Canada or the US or whatever and stay there without even understanding. And maybe they've never even been to Cape Town, South Africa, to even compare notes. Maybe they have, I don't know. So what I do is I try to share a balanced, honest opinion. I'll share the challenges and things that I've experienced here on the continent. I don't walk away from it. But at the same time, I'm going to showcase the beauty and unapologetically. Sometimes you have to be, if somebody comes at you with a strong opinion, sometimes you have to have just as strong of an opinion to let them know, well, okay, fine, then you stay there. I'm gonna continue to live my life and have a great time. And you have a great time there in Canada, Montreal or Toronto or wherever it might be, enjoy it. But I'm gonna do this. And what it does is those people who see it, it touches them. And they say, I wanna go experience that. And then when they come, we give them an experience of a lifetime. And then they keep coming back. We've had people travel with us 3 times in a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so they see and they feel, and they know that we're going to make sure that they go places that they're going to have a great time. So they don't worry about that. And so they know that our goal is to bridge the gap. But our goal is in bridging the gap, we recognize the mindsets that are back in our culture in the U.S., and the things that people say. Maybe somebody came, they came at the wrong time, or somebody came and they didn't have culture training, and they had to wait an hour for their food, or they had to sit in the traffic, or they had to deal with the Uber, playing games, and, where do you want to go? I want to go here. Okay, no, I'm not going. And maybe they've had that, but that's because they didn't have the culture training, perhaps didn't have the culture training. And so all you can do is present something of quality and be unapologetic and let it go from there.
Now, speaking, I've had people who said they left their $200,000 job and then moved to the continent. And then me as an African and Ghanaian, you know, watching it from my perspective, I tend to think, are you okay? I don't know what was your situation before embarking on this journey and leaving everything behind, but what was it like? Were you working in the state
Oh
before
yeah.
embarking on
Well,
this?
let me say this: I've not left everything behind. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make. I still have my businesses in the U.S. I have my U.S. base. I have my Ghana base. Working on my Tanzania base. One thing I understand is the importance of entrepreneurship and having your financial resources being
Running.
constant. When I've heard the stories of someone coming and they're just like, I just brought my $50,000, and now if you can live off $50,000 and go a little while. But for me, I kept my businesses, I kept my interest in America, because for me, America has and does steal from this part of the world unapologetically, with deception and a smile, and has no shame in their game. I was born in America. My ancestors in America built America. There's no way in the world I'm going to walk away from what they built. They paved the way so I could have this opportunity.
True.
And so I'm not going to just walk away from what my American ancestors did. And but then what I'm able to do, because I'm in a good position there, I can bring the resources back. And then I can create opportunities here, because the opportunities are being stolen. You know, you see so many people coming in from all over the world building their dreams, but then they pay the people here nothing, pennies. You know, some people are making 600 CDs a month.
Yeah.
You know, that's the equivalent of basically $50 a month. Who can survive off of that? But that's how the system is set up. So now I'll tell you one reason why a lot of African Americans are looking to relocate, because you were saying to yourself, have you lost your mind?
Yeah.
You're making $100,000 a year. Do you know what I could do with that? That's 1.2 million cities.
Yeah.
I could do a whole lot with that. But what we're looking for is peace. So the money is, yeah, we need it, but we'll take a pay cut for some peace. And that's what you see so many people looking for. And you'll find many of them say 35 plus, because they've been in that system and they're tired. They're like, you know what, y'all are using my skills. You don't want to pay me, even though you pay me $100,000 a year. My value is worth $500,000 a year. You're playing these corporate games. You have these microaggressions. You're robbing my time and my life, because I have to. You have me in the student loan debt that they're finally starting to do some sort of relief on. But they've made all the money off of the people all these years anyway, so they can give them a little break on it now. But it's like, those are the reasons why you see so many people coming from the U.S. And it doesn't make sense. Because somebody will always tell me, well, if Africa's so nice, how come so many people are trying to go there? I said, well, if America's so great, how come so many people are leaving? Everybody's not coming to Africa. There's people going to Central America. They're going to Mexico. They're going to other countries to get outside of that system. And they're getting outside of that system because they know that it's not bringing them peace. Health challenges, high blood pressure, diabetes, the foods is overly processed foods, air pollution. All of these things are really a recipe it'll sustain you maybe 75 years, but that's about it. And then, and that's if you medicated, heavily medicated, and all these other things that kind of prop you along. But that's why you see so many people leaving.
Now, how many countries have you been to so far in Africa?
23.
23. Over a period of what?
Well, we could start in 2018, but I would say that was only one in 2018. 2020 it was when everything started. So I would say there were 19 countries since 2020.
So just in 3 years, you've been to 19 countries in Africa.
Right, in 3 years, and then you tack on the other 4 countries, right? Because I did Ghana, Benin, Togo the first time around, second time around, I should say, and then Tanzania. That was all by 2019, and then after that, the rest of them.
So over 20 countries in 3 years or 4 years?
Yeah.
Wow. What uniqueness about African have you find visiting these countries? Something that kind of make you be like, oh, wow.
Oh, well, each country has something unique. Just the vibe of Ghana, the food, the culture, the kindness of the people in Ghana. But then when I go out to East Africa and Tanzania, it's a completely different vibe. You have the Serengeti. which is like a different paradise on Earth. You're standing in the Serengeti and you're like, this is really on Earth. And then you think about the Lion King movie, which was based on the Serengeti. Then you go out to Zanzibar, and I've been to Seychelles, and seeing the beaches and the waters, and that, so that's a unique quality. But then I go to South Africa, and then there's Table Mountain. Then I go out to Zambia and Zimbabwe and visit Moso Oyotunyi.
What is that?
That is what everyone knows as Victoria Falls. I have a problem calling it Victoria Falls because of the colonization of Victoria, who was the Queen of England at the time, imposed on it. So they call it Victoria Falls, but it's a beautiful falls. Flying the helicopter over that. Been going out to the Great Zimbabwe Empire in Zimbabwe, a very unique sight to see. Going to the churches in Lalibela in Ethiopia, the Great Pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx in Egypt, and going to the village in Aswan. As I come on around the coast, going to Senegal and walking with the lions in Senegal and petting the crocodiles in the Gambia, getting my dual citizenship in Sierra Leone, then spending time in Cotonou and looking at the huge statue right there in Cotonou in Benin, and then in Togo, spending time in Togo and just learning about the history in Togo. And then one of my favorite places is Cote d'Ivoire, and going to Grand Bassam in Cote d'Ivoire. And then in Cameroon, I mean, I could just go on and on and on, you know. So, but as you see, all of these places have something that's been etched into my mind that I would have never experienced. And every time I learn something different, every time my mind expands, and it's not something I could have gotten in a textbook. It's not something I could have really watched in a documentary, but it's when I got there and danced with the people, and we all shared a laugh. Just the other day, just yesterday, I was right outside of Kumasi, and I'm shooting a documentary, and there's this company called Bandex Bread, and they all sell bread on the side of the road. Now, in my videos, I'd always stop and support and show love and buy some bread. But yesterday, I got up there and put on the Bandex apron and decided I was going to sell some bread too. And just being there and just laughing and having a great time, it took me to another level of appreciation of humanity and who we are and the similarities. But I was in Costa Rica 2 weeks ago and hanging out with all the Afro Costa Ricans. And then I'll be in Panama, I'll be in Colombia, I've been in Salvador, in Brazil, and it's Salvador in the state of Bahia in Brazil, not El Salvador. It's in Brazil has the largest populations of Africans outside of Africa.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, and going to Cuba and seeing all the African descended people in Cuba, but then going to Carnival in London. So you have all of these people from the islands in Trinidad, Tobago, and Jamaica, and all of this culture. And had I stayed in my bubble in the U.S.,
you would never know. Well, send an advice to people who are willing to embark on the journey of exploring Africa, even for the first time, not just moving or packing their bags and living here permanently, but want to come test the waters. What would be your best advice for anybody like that?
Do your due diligence, do your culture training, understand what your expectations are. If you come looking, I tell everybody, always leave America in America. Leave them, or if you leave Canada in Canada, leave the UK in the UK. Do not go to any other country looking for your country, because chances are you're going to be disappointed. So I go with an open slate. I'm prepared for pretty much whatever. And in that though, that's when you get to meet some of the nicest people, because it's like they're willing to help you. Yeah, of course, people are wondering about if they're going to try to scam you. Of course, just like they'll try to scam you in America. You know, in America, they just veil it a little differently. They know how to do corporate scams. They know how to make it, dress it up in, different terms, and they're still scamming you. So if you understand, if you maintain your street sense, if you don't take one bad experience with a few people and project that on the entire population, and if you have the patience, I also say pack your patience. You have the patience to, I don't want to say endure, because it's not even that deep, but if you have the patience to just kind of go through that learning curve.
I like that. How much money is enough for someone to embark on a journey to Africa?
It depends. Depends on the level of
single person.
Oh, it depends on where you're going.
Coming to Ghana.
All right, so let's say you can do Ghana. That flight, see, the flights are the thing these days. The flights are what's going to get you. Because you can come to Ghana and have a great time for a couple $1,000s, just depending on where you want to stay. Depending on, now if you want to go upscale 5-star, you need to prepare to spend $5,000 if you're going to go really, really upscale with it. But if you want to kind of go more of a local route, you can Shoot, you can come to Ghana for really $500. You know, if you
Really?
go local, do
That's
everything
if you
local.
got your flight ticket already.
Yeah. Now your flight's going to cost you. If you like business class, expect to spend $3,000 to $6,000 on your flight. If you do economy, you can do $1,400, $1,500. Yeah, and you can make Ghana work. But I always tell people, don't travel to Africa on the cheap. So if you're going to do it right and do it well, spend between $4,000 to $5,000. Just on your accommodations.
Over a period of what?
Oh, well, it depends on each person's situation, financial situation. 6 months, if you do save up for 6 months, then you can do it. For some people, they already have the money. If you want to have a quality experience, especially for that first trip, go ahead and spend the money. I tell people, don't be cheap, because now you're going to have a bad experience. You're going to want to blame the continent because you were being cheap. You were the one trying to pinch pennies and trying to go, when just, hey, just go ahead and spend the money. Let somebody put it together for you. So there's certain things you don't have to think about. Now you can enjoy the culture and then come back. And then now you can figure out how to navigate the Airbnb route. Because some people go, I'm gonna do the Airbnb because that's cheaper. And they aren't prepared for the power outages or the water outages or with those things that can come with that territory. I said, well, just come stay at the hotel, do that first. Then come back and do the Airbnb. Now you know how Momo works. Now you know how the Uber system works. You can get around a little bit better. So that's my advice for anybody coming for the first time.
I like that. Do you have a favorite African country so far after visiting more than 20?
I don't. and sometimes people try to call me on it and say, well, you're being safe. There's no need for me to be safe. If I prefer a country, the countries over another, I have no problem saying it. I have a particular, I would say I'm probably partial to Ghana because I have my business here. It was my first country, but it's not necessarily my favorite country. And that's the thing, because there are things that I love about Ghana, but there are things I love about South Africa. So wherever I can stay for an extended period of time, I can stay for an extended period of time in South Africa. I can stay for an extended period of time in Tanzania. I don't think I can necessarily stay for an extended period of time in Egypt, but I believe Egypt is so important to the broader story, especially for the African diaspora. A lot of people don't realize that because they think it's just, a bunch of Arab-looking people in Egypt. Was like, no, there's a bigger story here. I love Cote d'Ivoire. I'm probably going to be more partial towards English-speaking countries, just because of the language.
So it's easier for you?
That's all. It's a colonizing language that I was raised with. So that's, it's not because I prefer it. It's that's the language I know, and I can navigate it a little bit better. But I love the vibe in Benin. I really like Benin for some reason, and being in Cotonou. And so I've forced myself to learn a few words of the other dominant colonizing language here on the continent, which is French. But it's not because I want to learn French to feel cultured. I actually, part of me is kind of resisting it because I don't want to feel cultured in that sense, because now it feels like I'm being forced back into that particular mindset. And I've heard in America, that's what it is. Oh, you speak French, you're cultured. Oh, you speak, and I appreciate people speaking.
What is your cultured?
Meaning you're a bit more educated.
Oh, okay.
You've been around a little bit more. You have a little bit more class, a little bit more distinction if you speak French, and if you speak, even if you speak Spanish, and I'm not opposed to that. Meaning people speaking multiple languages. It's like I know I speak a little bit of Spanish. I can survive with Spanish, but when it comes to you're better because you speak these colonizing languages or you're more educated. And I was like, well, why aren't we speaking more Yoruba or Twi or Swahili?
The mindset,
Yeah, because everybody looks down on it or don't even have an interest.
But it's a thing in Ghana, like when we're going to junior high school, senior high school, when we speak our local languages, we get whipped in class by the teachers with a cane. And then you're mostly looked at uncivilized when you speak your own language. And when you speak the English language, you're like, okay, this person is smart and educated, just like what you say.
Now, where did that come from?
Slavery?
It came from colonization, in particular here on the continent. See, that's the thing I never understood. I never understood how we have, because many Black Americans are colonized in their thinking. If many Black Americans, if they could, they would trade in their blackness and become white in a heartbeat. they would trade it in so fast, and they would leave their neighborhoods, and they would want, because you see it in their behavior. You see it in how they dress and how they move and how they flow. You see it in how they treat each other. But the same thing is happening here on the continent.
Yeah.
So like you talk about the children being whipped for speaking their own languages. And I've had people tell me, and they said, well, there had to be a language because there were so many languages, so they had to pick one so that we could communicate. Well, why y'all pick the white man's language? Why y'all pick that language? Why couldn't you find one of the local indigenous languages and agree on that? But you had to pick a foreigner's language to come in and to be the dominant language. And if for some reason, someone doesn't stop and say, what's wrong with that? It's just like the people wearing the wigs, the judges and the lawyers wearing the wigs. Now, I don't know, as the longer I live, the more confident. I used to apologize and say, I don't know. See, I'm about to say something controversial. Now I say what I have to say. This is what I realized, and I got some heat for this in Kenya. The crown, what we put on our head, our brain, that's the CPU, the motherboard, whichever one you want to call it. What we put on top of our head really reflects what we're thinking. So I remember one time in Kenya, young lady, she clearly just finished law school. So she had on both white people's wigs. I'm gonna let that marinate for some folks for a little while. They were like, what does that mean? So she had on the first wig, and then she had on the blonde thing.
The judges,
right, the judge's wigs. And so we were like, well, so why? What does that mean? She said, I don't know. Now you just went through law school. You're being deemed as intelligent. You're being deemed as the cream of the crop, but you don't know why you're wearing this wig on the top of your head. And I see it in all the Anglophone countries. You don't see it in Francophone countries as much. I haven't seen it in Francophone countries, but any English-speaking countries, South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Kenya, Tanzania, you'll see these wigs. And has anyone stopped to say, if I'm putting this on my head, what is this communicating to the rest of the world? What is this communicating to my children if I'm putting something that doesn't even belong to me? It isn't even, and this is...
Do you know the history behind it?
What I do know is they're all controlled by British systems, and that is a British influence. That is not indigenous to Africa, meaning that the blonde white wig is not indigenous. And some people say, well, they got it from Egypt and all that. That blonde white wig that they're wearing is not indigenous to those people. And they did it in America too, though. So you'll see the people in colonial Williamsburg, and they're walking around with the little wigs on. And so until we start taking that stuff off of our heads, there'll never be real independence, because there's still an affection for the oppressor. There's still a connection to the oppressor. And I've heard so many people push back and defend it. So many black Americans, so many people on the continent of Africa, and these are supposed to be intelligent people. You don't even need intelligence to stop and say, something ain't right about that.
Diallo Sambre said that Africans love their oppressors. That statement, what do you think about it?
Well, I don't like to generalize, because you have people who do push back. I think about the great freedom fighters in Namibia who pushed back against the Germans, and those in South Africa who were pushing back against the Dutch and the British, and they were fighting. And even in Zambia and Zimbabwe, which used to be known as Rhodesia, those who were fighting in Nigeria, those who were fighting in Kenya. So everybody doesn't see it that way. But what happens is when the real currency of the world is your military capacity. And no African country has the military capacity to defeat the French, the British, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Danes, anybody, other than one another. So because of that, these puppet politicians will be put in place. And you'll see it if you look at the history. There's some politicians who have to go up to Britain to go and get approval before they can become presidents of these, what are supposed to be independent states. But if you're really independent, you don't have to go to the crown of England to get approval. But so if you put people in place, I'm gonna go to another one. I'm gonna go even deeper. If you put people in place who are willing to say that the image of God is white, So that was the thing that shocked me the most when I came here to Ghana. I saw all these brown, melanated people in a false white Jesus everywhere. And he had different Jesuses. Yeah, I was like, that ain't the same one. So which one is the right one? Which Jesus is the right one? Now, we go through that too in America. Don't get me wrong. It's not as bad. About 25 years or so ago, they started taking them out of churches because black folks are like, look, I'm not coming to your church if that's up in here. So it got to be a money thing. Folks are, I'll take my tithes over here to the, a little bit more Afro-centered church. At least they have a black Jesus hanging. And so even with that, that's a whole nother conversation. But when you have systems of indoctrination where you have God as being white, your judicial system tells you that everything that's good is white. They've already demonized everything in West Africa as being witchcraft and bad, and something bad is gonna happen to you. But then you come from there. If you don't know what's going on around you, you'll go back and say, I don't want any parts of that. Let me go over there to America, the home of the free and the land of the brave, and get over there and start taking advantage of all of the opportunities those lazy black Americans aren't taking advantage of. And so that they have that whole thing going on without understanding all the people and all the black Americans that have been fighting in America for the very rights for those who come over to take advantage of. See, it's this big mind game that's been played on all of us. And until we stop long enough to analyze it, that's what it's going to take, analyzing it and saying, wait a minute, why is it that you have the Akan people in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, and the only thing that separates them is this border between the French and the British. They speak French over here, they speak English over here, but somehow they don't like each other. But in Cameroon, they'll fight each other over who speaks English and who speaks French. And where did that come from? Where does this thing that we now, even the countries themselves, I mean, if we want to get real deep with it, Nigeria, the country of Nigeria was named by a white woman.
By a white woman?
By a white woman. So I'm walking around calling myself Nigerian. That is an invention. So you now go to the Berlin Conference.
That means that's not even who you are.
That's not even who you are. So even when we call ourselves Kenyan and we call ourselves Ghanaian, these are all inventions that came about. Now, it's because of the systems that we're in. But when you go back to Berlin, 1885, and they carved up the continent of Africa, there were no African leaders there. These were all European leaders who decided, this is what we're going to create. And so as they began to, now independence came, and then that's when you started seeing countries get their names. This used to be Gold Coast, so then it became Ghana, Zaire, Congo, Rhodesia split, Zambia, Zimbabwe. You start seeing those types of things happening. But at the core of it, the system never changed. Even with the guise of independence. The government system never changed, the court system never changed, the economic system never changed. You look at the Francophone countries and you see the CFA, still run by the French. So we're independent. Like, no, you're not independent if they're controlling your money, if they control your language, if they control your education, if they're controlling if they're demonizing your indigenous religions and they're not telling you that their religion is superior. What else can we expect?
Do you know you'd be fought by your fellow Ghanaian for telling them this religion are indoctrination? Have you ever spoken?
I have spoken. I say everything on my channel. And guess what? Because I speak good English.
Yeah.
And already shut it like, well, he does speak good English though. He knows how to say it. So when you understand, see, it's hard for someone, because I used to be indoctrinated. I used to be heavy into all of it. I was one of those people. I was heavy. I mean, we have the same problems in America. So it's not a Ghana thing. It's a broad problem when you've been taught and trained by European systems that have been designed to exploit your labor, your skill, your talent, and your brain for profit. So when someone is now coming to you, what I've been able to do is to tap into that one area where someone asked the question within themselves, but they don't have the courage to say it out loud. So they stop and they think, that's true. And they'll take it back, and they'll take it back, and they'll take it back. And if they talk to me long enough, they'll figure out that I know something. They'll try to say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about as far as indoctrination. And you don't know. I said, well, the Catholics were actually the spearhead behind the transatlantic slave trade. And they're like, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, go to the Duns Diversus, Pope Nicholas V, and how he gave the authority for the Portuguese and King Alfonso V to come into West Africa and take whatever they wanted from those who didn't believe what they believed, and that was what started to open the door. And they're like, I don't believe it. Well, the Catholics will tell you themselves what they did. So now, what is it you want me to do? I mean, I'm trying to give you, I'm dropping something on you so you can free your mind. But just because you've done something your entire life, it's a system. Nobody's telling you not to believe in God. Nobody's telling you to. What we're saying is analyze what you believe and get to the origins of it. If you get to the origins of what you believe, you might find out some of the things that you've deemed as witchcraft might not be as witchcraft as the thing you're following. Because whenever, the scriptures, and then I can go there with them, I said, well, the scriptures tell us that Satan came to steal, kill, and destroy. And I said, and the scriptures also tell us to judge a tree by the fruit that it bears. So if I judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, and if I'm looking at all these systems that are supposed to be good and holy and righteous, what's the fruit falling off of those trees?
I like that. Now, I said something like, we are funding white supremacy through religion, and then because all the churches, the big churches are white, and it's head in Rome and all these big countries. The money is white there. That money is loaned to the people to create businesses and infrastructure on the continent. And then they own everything on the continent. So if we want to stop white supremacy, we stop going to churches.
Oh, you shut it down. But see, the thing is that when you tap into a person's soul, you tap into their existence. And there's always the battle for the soul. Because the soul will govern everything, how they spend their money, how they move, who they marry, where they live, what they teach their children. And I spent more than 20 years building, setting up churches, leading churches. I could run down a whole thing.
Really?
Oh, I've done it all. I've been in there. I know the back room.
About it.
I know the back room. That's why I say somebody knows I know something, because I can speak so eloquently and with so much authority about it, because I know what it's like to be when you're sitting there and you're having to come up with an offering and you're trying to put together a strategy on how you're going to raise money. I know the programming at the beginning of the year. You go from watch night. This is when everybody now want to repent for their sins and this year, and then now they want to give all their money for the tithes they didn't give, so they're giving it all on December 31st. They know that's big money night. Then what happens is you open up the beginning of the year with a big old revival. So now everybody's like, okay, I'm going to do better this year, and I got to give this money this year. So all the people come flocking in, just like the gym. It's no different than going to work out in the gym. Oh, I got to do right this year. And then you start going to the gym. Well, 2 months in, you fall off again. And the same routine happens over and over. And it's sad because people have a lateral movement. It's a lateral thing. Whereas if you really get into the scripture and read the scriptures, you should be ascending.
Yeah.
You should be growing. But see, there's something that happens if you believe you're growing and you're really not. If you believe you're growing and you're really not, that's self-deception. And so, again, it goes into each person's family's history and culture and system and all of that. And we could have a whole other conversation.
I like conversations like that, because normally, even when it comes to business and how to build business based on human psychology and what's happening around your civilization, mostly you can prey upon the minds of the people to sell your products. Big companies are doing that, taking advantage of the weakness of the people. The addiction, example, technology. You can use the addiction of people to sell products.
Sure.
And become a multi-million dollar. So I'm going to ask you this question. Knowing the psychology of the mind, do black people begin to embark on the same journey that white folks embarked on, using the psychology to build their wealth, or there's a different way to go about creating wealth?
No, you're in their system. So by being in their system, the wise approach would be able to learn and master their system. And then what you can do as you learn and master their system, you don't have to utilize the results the same way they do. You can now take the results that you get and create something completely different. And now you can use that for positive change, education, creating opportunities for others. But if you don't know their system, and you're going to you'll frustrate yourself. So now everybody has a different journey. But my first step is, how does this system work? Okay, how can I now take advantage of this system to accomplish the goal that I have? My goal is to bring as many people to the continent and influence as many people to come and see for themselves, because I know of the deficiency, the educational deficiency that we have in the United States and the Caribbean and Canada and other places. So what do? Well, we create a bridge for them, and we also create a system for them. Now, as a result, it's lucrative, yes it is. But we also now turn that into educational resources. That's why we have the Educational Academy coming. That's why we have documentaries that we're working on, because we're now looking to say, what can we do? And that's the reality of how you do
like
it.
that.
When I was in the church system and I started asking questions, I was ostracized.
Yeah.
I was blackballed.
Yeah.
But I was good because I knew how to make my money outside of that system. So I was like, I don't care. The scriptures tell me that I need to guard my heart for
It will even start from your own house with your parents.
Yeah.
Imagine you discovering something within the church system and growing up in a Christian home, and then you having to tell your parents what you've discovered and be like, okay, I want to stay behind.
Oh yeah, you're gonna
have a problem with your
You're gonna have a
parents.
lot of problems.
Your community, so people become hesitant and like, oh, do I do it? Do I don't do it? But I think the awakening is there, but people don't know how to take that and run with it or kind of free themselves from the thing they've been practicing, their parents have been practicing for years and years without having to question themselves.
Well, see, it's tough. It's really tough because the web is deep, and it takes a lot of courage to stand up to people that you respect and love, because they'll take their interpretation of something, and that's the gospel to them. And if you come with a contrary thought, first of all, the pride within them is like, how dare you even question me? How dare you even, there's something wrong with you to even question my interpretation. Instead of them saying, is it possible that I could be incorrect? Now, that's when I'm able to determine whether or not somebody is truly genuine about anything. It's like, are you willing to at least stop and think long enough? But parents raising their children are not usually apt to listening to their children until their children become their parents. And even then, they won't listen to their children because they've raised them. Look, I changed your diapers. I fed you. You had a fever 104. I was the one that stayed up with you all night. And you gonna come telling me about this. It was that same God. And they'll come down, they'll go down that whole road. So you know what?
Yeah.
If I have this conversation with you, and perhaps they're not ready yet, but I'm gonna tell you something. Let me say this. You would be amazed that many of the people who watch my channel and follow my channel are men between the ages of 75 and 85, and they have a heavy religious background in the church.
Wow.
And they said, and this is what they've come to me and said, they said, I still love God, I love the Lord, but there's something wrong with this system because I've lived it my whole life, and I've watched these people stay stagnant. I've watched this system do nothing. We give out some turkeys, we'll go feed somebody, we'll send a little bootleg mission trip somewhere. But when it really got down to the core of helping people really thrive, we did not do that. And they were just speaking for their situations. I'm not putting a blanket statement on anybody's church, because there are a lot of churches that do great things. They actually do help the community in a lot of different ways and are really intentional about teaching some very difficult subjects and trying to make it fit within their ideologies and their philosophies and their religious beliefs. So I see, places trying to do it. But, when we really start getting to the origins, and that's what happened when I came to Ghana and I stood at Elmina dungeon, I recognized that I didn't understand the origins. In America, they teach us that our history began with slavery. We arrived as slaves. They didn't tell us we were enslaved and we descended from great people, and that the Portuguese and the British and the Dutch and the French and the Danes and all of them came to different parts of Africa, destroyed the villages, destroyed everything, stole the natural resources, set up shop, basically took over and did whatever they wanted to do with the assistance of many indigenous people who were on the continent. We can't walk away from that either. But that's a part of it, throughout history in different places in the world. Whenever there's conquering, that's what happens. But when in the American textbook, you are a descendant of a slave. And your people had to fight for basic rights and to integrate. Now, as we begun to this is the other thing, many of the HBCUs named after white people. A lot of black people don't know that. So they're walking around with the name of the person, and they say, well, they would try to do great things, and it started out as religious indoctrination. We want to help these poor people. I was on the plane here in just yesterday, going to Kumasi, a plane full of Mormons, black Mormons. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, black Mormons? Black Mormons. But if someone changes their propaganda and catches somebody at the right time, you mess around and have black Americans as a part of Ku Klux Klan. I wouldn't be surprised. You look up now, how y'all join the KKK? Well, they changed their heart and they apologized and they feel as though they're going to do right now. And, you know, the Grand Wizard came down and took off his hat and offered, you know, so peace pipe. And now here we are working together. Instead of saying, nah, Jack, I know who you are. Nah.
We are too forgiving as black people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's how we've been indoctrinated. Because we read that doctrine. And basically, if you give people, if you take a book that has 1,800 chapters, and give them 250, and then you put somebody up there who doesn't really, who's more emotional than intellectual, and they say, you know what, if your enemy slaps you, let them slap you again. And if they steal your tunic, give them the next one. and all of that type of stuff. And the very people who teach you that don't do that. Because they talking about when the places that, you know, God is I'm gonna trust God to protect me, you know. No, this is what God said. This is not what God. This is what the guy said on the video. He said, black people and Africans will pray to the God of Israel to protect them, but Israel is using bombs to protect itself.
Yeah.
I said that. It's something simple like that. But see, most people don't even know where Israel came from. You know, the modern day Israel. So they're thinking that it's always been right there, but without understanding that the British and the Americans. I encourage people to go watch the talk that U.S. President Harry Truman made as he was talking about the Jews in Palestine. I need somewhere to put the Jews, and they're not happy. And in Palestine, I got to put them somewhere. This is coming on the heels of World War II. So now for those of us who don't know, we're thinking that these people have been here the whole time. They don't even know they were looking at putting them in part of Uganda and Kenya. And they were just trying to find somewhere for them to go after World War II. And so the state of Israel and where it gets its military from and its support from, the British and the Americans. And the Americans they do not apologize about their role and why Israel is strategically put right there. So it's all of this stuff. And then I remember I saw this black pastor, he's like, I stand with Israel. I'm like, Negro, do you even understand what you are standing? You just standing there because you watch all them white pastors on them little conservative radio shows tell you that's what you're supposed to do. But have you even took the time to understand the Palestine story? Do people even understand the story of Ukraine and Russia? They think Putin is a bad guy. And I'm not saying he's good, but Putin is bad. Putin is bad. And the Ukraine, look at the poor Ukraine and what's going on in Ukraine. But do they understand the European Union and all of the deals that they reneged on with Russia? And so now, could this be Russia defending itself? You know, these are questions that we dare not ask, because if we start asking these questions,
their narrative won't play.
No, it won't play. And then it also says that, wait a minute, these people are starting to think outside of what we want them to think. So then that's when they start to seek to silence the voices that raise these questions. And they're just questions. It's just let me just question what's being said now. Let me just put this into perspective so that I don't walk around deaf, dumb, and blind. Let me just at least analyze it and say, all right, y'all put that on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, and all of them are in concert with one another. There must be something wrong. Because if all of them are saying the same thing to the marching of the beat of the same drum, and everyone seems to be, this is what America teaches you. Because I'll hear things about, when I come to the continent, all you black Americans are just angry and unforgiving and all of that. So we've dealt with this BS for long enough. We understand what's going on. And so we can see through this mess. And so if you want to follow that and believe in them people, well, we believe in working in diplomacy. Well, the people that you're working with don't believe in diplomacy. Because the minute you don't want to be diplomatic, they will bomb your tail. And you'll be sitting there like, well, what happened? They'll put an embargo on you. They will they will devalue your currency. They will send a coup into your country. But these are the same people that you're saying, we want to be diplomatic with them. We should be good with them. You should be strategic with them and understand how they operate. Now, if you want to flow in their system, understand how their system works, and then work it to your advantage so you can do some things to help improve conditions. Because you can. If you have enough people who understand the system, then they can improve situations. The biggest thing that a colonizer or an imperialist wants is their share of the pie. It's like, if you're making me money, then we're all good. So you just got to figure out, how do we work this together where my people don't suffer. And there's a way to do it. You look at Singapore. You can look at Dubai. You look at all the money. Everybody wants to go to Dubai without even understanding the origins of Dubai. They just want to go have a good time. But I understand in 1979, it was 1 or 2 skyscrapers in all of Dubai. Now it is the place to go. Where did that money come from? See, that's why where did the money come from? USA, and among other places. You know, so it's that the depth. When we get into the depth of these things, these conversations, and start enlightening ourselves, then we flow differently in the world. And that's what you see while I'm on the African continent. I love on folks. I love the places I go. I'm unapologetic, and all I do is just share the information. The greatest weapon of mass destruction from misinformation and disinformation is proper education. And all I hope to do is to spark people to go research it themselves. Fact check what I'm saying. If I misspoke on something, go get it checked out. At least they're going to go look. That's all I hope for, and that's what you see me doing, and having a lot of fun bringing people over to the continent.
I like that. Now let's talk about what they're working on right now, the documentary you're filming in Ghana. How did that come about?
Well, I wanted to tell the story, the depth of the story, because it wasn't just a trip to Ghana, it was an awakening. So the documentary talks about that, but it also talks about my journey as a fatherless child and how I overcame being a fatherless child and raising 4 amazing, they're adults now, in the different ways. And so I have my middle son, who's a chef. He's on tour. He's on the documentary. He's going to be featured in the documentary as well. But I also talk about some of the challenges, some of the things that we're talking about here, and weaving that into a conversation to inspire others, regardless of ethnicity, to want to learn more about what this continent has to offer, but then also the value for those in the diaspora. Say, just go check it out and go see, whether they come with us or not. It's not even a sales pitch to come travel with us. It's just telling a story and how deep I could live my entire life in America. And if I was not intentional about breaking outside of that mold, I would still be sitting in America in the rat race. But I needed to leave America to discover who I am, who I was. And so because of that, it's helping other people do it. And I'm so glad that I didn't leave this earth and not discover, because it would have, if I'd have gotten to 80, 90 years old and just discovered this now, I would have been heartbroken. I'd have been devastated, you know, because I would have been like, I had the opportunity, but I didn't. I allowed someone else's perspective and someone else's opinions to dictate and to influence, I would say, not dictate.
That's deep.
Influence my interests. So even when I first came to the continent, people laughed at me, mocked me. That was my fuel. So when the more mocking, the more ridicule, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm sitting there laughing because I'm saying clearly, these people don't know. And I said, and it just drives me to go more and more. So we're pushing this documentary. We would love for it to be picked up. But I don't even worry about that, because those who are supposed to see it are going to see it. And I'm hopeful for the resources that if no one picks it up, we promote it ourselves. We will not wait around for Hollywood to give us a green light, for any of the corporate entities to say we approve of this. We're creating in such a way that we've approved of it. And the resources, the one who creates all the resources creates all the resources. And so whatever resource is supposed to come this way will come this way to be able to do what we needed to do.
I like that. Tell me about Maximum Impact before you leave.
Sure. Well, Maximum Impact Enterprises is, as I said before, an educational resource, but we do travel through, or education through travel. But we have leisure, fun, cultural experiences. Our focus right now is the travel component. I do have my children's book series, The Adventures of Darren and Destiny. So that's available on Amazon, and well, that's where it's available now. We have our Maximum Impact Success Academy, which is designed to help families learn more about the continent of Africa, but a plethora of other topics. We focus on entrepreneurship, life skills, family structure and family planning. And then the travel component, we go to 35 different African diaspora destinations around the world, and we are encouraging bridging the gap between Brazil, Africa, Central America, the Caribbean, Europe, the United States, any place where you'll find people who descend from the continent of Africa. That is what we do. We create amazing curated experiences. We don't call them trips, because we understand that a trip could be, you could go on a trip anywhere, but you cannot find a maximum impact travel experience anywhere. And we the other thing that we do is we make sure we serve our people with excellence. because there are a lot of expectations where we come from, low expectations when they see people who have melanin. But what we like to do is show them something completely different and taking care of our people wherever we are, whether it's in Africa, Central America, UK, making sure that they're properly compensated, they're properly tipped, so they don't look back and say, oh man, I did all this work and I got nothing. We've helped people get their master's degrees, get homes, get cars outside of their salaries. We take care of our US base. When we accomplish a major goal, there are financial incentives that go along with it. There are trips that come along with it. We just believe in taking care of folks and making sure the morale is high, because we know that when that's all in place, all of that's working together, that we can build something amazing, and that's what we've done.
I like that. I like that. How many people have you brought to Africa so far?
Almost 1,000.
Almost 1,000.
Yes.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of people.
Wow.
And more on the way. Our goal is to get up to 2,500 per year coming to the continent or different African diaspora destinations.
Wow.
So we're well on our way.
I like that. How do people find you?
They can go to MaximumImpactTravel.com if they want to find the website. If they want to find me personally, I'm at J Cameron Official. That's Jay Cameron Official on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, on all the platforms, on LinkedIn. Just type in my name. If you type in J Cameron, I'm either going to be the first name that comes up, or this jazz musician will be the first name who comes up, and he's deceased. His Wikipedia will come up, but if you type in my name, you'll be able to find me on all platforms.
I like that. Thank you so much for talking to me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now, guys, where we are currently filming is called Bureau. Bureau is a co-working space located in the middle of Osu, very close to everywhere. Okay, if you were moving from the US, UK, you want somewhere to work with high-speed internet, no doom so which is the light going off and on, this is the best place for you. Come and check it out. And when you get here, just say you're coming from Webnation Africa, you might get a discount. And also, on the 27th of December, we are organizing an Influencer Fest 2023, the first edition, and it's happening here in Ghana, Accra, at Castillo. It's just about a minute drive from the American Embassy. Make sure you check it out. Check the description or the poster on the screen to find more details about the event. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be networking between everybody's going to be there. Whether all the biggest creators in Ghana are going to be there, as well as even TikTokers are going to be there, Instagrammers, all platforms, anything social media, anybody doing social media content creation is going to be at the event. Also, people coming from the diaspora, you don't want to miss this. And also brand, if you have a big brand, you want to find creators that would help you communicate your brand, this is the best place to be. You can see them in real life, shake hands with them, and partner with them moving forward. So you don't want to miss out. Tickets are selling. You can buy a table if you have friends. You want to buy a table, you can get a nice drink per circle with free food. Even if you want sushi, you can get it. Make sure you buy your ticket. You don't want to miss out. General admission tickets are selling right now. You don't want to miss out. 27th of December. Buy your ticket. And in addition, if you are a vendor, you sell sobolo or local hibiscus, anything that is, any product, merchandise, hopefully it's synchronized with what we stand for. Come through to the event. So we have early bird ticket going for the vendors for 1,000 cedis. You can get a spot. You sell bags, you sell clothes, anything that you sell. Make sure you come through, get your vendor spot, and yeah, let's make this event an amazing one. So yeah, without further ado, thank you guys so much for watching this video. It's an amazing one, and thank you for coming. All right.
Thank you.